Fleetwood Mac, one of the most legendary rock bands of all time. A group that redefined rock and pop, selling over 120 million records worldwide. But behind the success, the fame, and the music was a story of love, heartbreak, and betrayal. At the center of it all was Lindsey Buckingham, the musical genius who helped shape the band's signature sound. His intricate guitar work, visionary production, and dynamic songwriting played a crucial role in their rise to superstardom. But with brilliance came tension, and the relationships within Fleetwood Mac were anything but stable. Passionate romances turned into bitter rivalries. Personal struggles spilled into the music, and after decades of highs and lows, one final decision shattered everything. In 2018, Buckingham was abruptly fired from the band he helped define. What led to his downfall, and was it really the end? This is the untold story of Lindsey Buckingham and Fleetwood Mac. It all began in the late 1960s in Northern California, where two young musicians, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, first crossed paths. Though they attended the same high school, their connection didn't form immediately. Lindsey was already immersed in music, a quiet but intense guitarist who practiced relentlessly. Stevie, on the other hand, had a free-spirited energy, drawn to poetry and melodies, but still searching for her voice. Their worlds collided at a casual gathering when Lindsey picked up a guitar and started playing. Stevie, instinctively harmonizing, sang along. It was a fleeting moment, but one that hinted at something bigger. A musical chemistry neither of them could ignore. That chemistry would fully take shape when Lindsey joined a band called Fritz. The group was making a name for itself in the Bay Area music scene, blending rock and psychedelic influences. One day, their drummer made a suggestion that would change everything. Why not bring Stevie in as a singer? It was an unexpected move, but Stevie accepted. Her presence added a new dimension to the band's sound, and soon Fritz was opening for some of the biggest names in rock: Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and even Santana. They were sharing stages with legends, getting a taste of the rock star life before they had even made it big. But success didn't come easy. While Fritz gained some recognition, they struggled to break into the industry. Record labels weren't interested, and the music scene was shifting rapidly. By the early 1970s, the band dissolved, leaving Lindsey and Stevie at a crossroads. They had dedicated years to their music, and now they had nothing to show for it. Instead of giving up, they decided to take a leap of faith together. The two left behind their roots and moved to Los Angeles, determined to make it as a duo. This marked the beginning of Buckingham Nicks, their first real attempt at creating something of their own. They poured their hearts into writing and recording, scraping together whatever money they could to put together an album. In 1973, Buckingham Nicks was released. It was raw, emotional, and showcased their undeniable talent. Lindsey's intricate guitar work, Stevie's haunting voice, and a chemistry that was impossible to ignore. But despite its artistic merit, the album failed commercially. Record labels didn't see the potential, radio stations barely played it, and the duo struggled to survive. They were broke, rejected, and on the verge of giving up. During this time, their personal relationship also evolved. What started as a musical partnership turned into something deeper. They were young, in love, and chasing a dream, but the pressure of failure weighed heavily on them. The music industry was ruthless, and they often found themselves questioning whether they had made the right choice. Still, they refused to quit. They played small gigs, working odd jobs just to afford rent. Lindsay took session work to keep them afloat, while Stevie worked as a waitress and a cleaning lady. It wasn't glamorous, but they believed in their music, even when no one else did. What they didn't know was that fate was about to intervene. A chance encounter, a twist of luck, and one moment in a recording studio would soon change their lives forever. By 1974, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were struggling to keep their dreams alive. Their album had flopped, money was tight, and they were barely scraping by in Los Angeles. But sometimes, all it takes is one stroke of luck to change everything. At Sound City Studios, where Buckingham and Nicks had recorded their album, destiny was quietly working behind the scenes. Mick Fleetwood, drummer and founding member of Fleetwood Mac, happened to be there one day, scouting for a new guitarist. His band was in turmoil once again, with guitarist Bob Welch recently departing. They needed someone new, someone fresh, to help redefine their sound. As Fleetwood walked through the studio, he overheard something that stopped him in his tracks: Lindsey Buckingham's guitar playing. It was intricate, rhythmic, unlike anything he'd heard before. Immediately intrigued, he asked the engineers, "Who is that?" When he learned it was the same Lindsey Buckingham from Buckingham Nicks, he made a decision. This was the musician Fleetwood Mac needed. A call was made. Lindsey was offered the role of lead guitarist for Fleetwood Mac. But there was one problem. Lindsey wasn't interested in joining alone. He had built his career with Stevie Nicks by his side, and he wasn't about to abandon her. His response was clear: "If you want me, you take Stevie too." It wasn't an easy decision for Fleetwood Mac. Up until that point, they had never had a female lead singer, and bringing in two new members was a major shift. Christine McVie, the band's keyboardist and songwriter, was one of the deciding voices. She recognized Stevie's potential and ultimately agreed to let her in. Just like that, Fleetwood Mac had a brand new lineup: Mick Fleetwood, John McVie, Christine McVie, Lindsey Buckingham, and Stevie Nicks. Few could have predicted what would happen next. In 1975, the new Fleetwood Mac released their self-titled album, and almost overnight, everything changed. The sound was different. Lindsey's guitar gave the band a sharper, more modern edge. Stevie's haunting vocals brought a mystical energy. The chemistry was electric. The album was packed with hits, including Rhiannon, Stevie's hypnotic song about a Welsh witch, and Landslide, a deeply personal ballad she had written about change and uncertainty. For the first time, Fleetwood Mac wasn't just a respected blues rock band, they were mainstream stars. The album skyrocketed up the charts, selling millions of copies and turning them into one of the biggest bands in America. They were playing sold-out shows, appearing on magazine covers, and basking in the glow of their newfound fame. But behind the scenes, cracks were already beginning to form. The same passion that fueled their music also fueled personal conflicts. As success grew, so did the pressures, creative differences, relationships, and hidden tensions that would only intensify as they pushed forward. They had reached the top, but the real drama was just beginning. By 1976, Fleetwood Mac was at the height of their success, but behind the scenes, everything was falling apart. What should have been their most triumphant moment quickly turned into an emotional battlefield. Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, once inseparable, were now barely speaking outside of the studio. Years of love, struggle, and artistic ambition had collided, and their relationship was unraveling. Meanwhile, John and Christine McVie, who had been married for nearly a decade, were headed for divorce. They had been bandmates, lovers, and creative partners, but the pressures of fame and constant touring had driven them apart. Even Mick Fleetwood wasn't immune. His marriage was also crumbling, adding yet another layer of tension to an already volatile situation. With emotions running high, the studio became both a battleground and a sanctuary. The only way they knew how to deal with their pain was to put it into the music. And so, Rumours, one of the greatest albums of all time, was born from heartbreak, betrayal, and raw emotion. Each song became a letter, a message wrapped in melody. Lindsay poured his frustration into Go Your Own Way, a blistering anthem of anger and rejection aimed directly at Stevie. The lyrics were biting, the guitars aggressive. It was his way of saying, "You did this to us, now live with it." But Stevie wasn't going to let him have the last word. She responded with Dreams, a haunting, ethereal ballad that told her side of the story. Where Lindsay was fiery and bitter, Stevie was wistful and reflective, singing about moving on and finding peace in the storm. Then there was Don't Stop, Christine McVie's way of looking past the pain. Even as her marriage with John was ending, she wrote a song filled with optimism, a reminder that tomorrow would bring something new, even if today felt unbearable. But while the music was brilliant, the recording process was anything but smooth. Long hours turned into sleepless nights. The band was fueled by alcohol, heartbreak, and a staggering amount of cocaine. Arguments broke out constantly, with band members barely holding it together between takes. Some nights, they couldn't even be in the same room, forced to record their parts separately just to avoid another fight. And yet, somehow, through all the chaos, they created something timeless. In 1977, Rumours was released, and the world couldn't get enough. It was more than an album. It was an emotional confession, a glimpse into the personal wars being fought within Fleetwood Mac. The record shattered expectations, selling over 40 million copies worldwide and becoming one of the best-selling albums in history. The band had turned their heartbreak into a masterpiece, but even with all the success, the wounds ran deep. Rumours had made them legends, but at what cost? The cracks were only getting deeper, and soon they would be impossible to ignore. After Rumours became a global phenomenon, Fleetwood Mac found themselves trapped in a whirlwind of success, exhaustion, and impossible expectations. The album had made them superstars, but it had also left them emotionally drained. As soon as the record was out, they were thrown into a relentless touring schedule, performing night after night, city after city. The pressure was immense, not just from the industry, but from themselves. How could they possibly top what they had just created? The weight of expectation loomed over them as they returned to the studio in 1979 to record their follow-up. But Lindsey Buckingham had no interest in repeating the past. While the world wanted Rumours Part 2, he was determined to push boundaries and break new ground. He became the driving force behind Tusk, an album unlike anything Fleetwood Mac had ever done before. It was experimental, raw, and at times completely unrecognizable from the polished pop sound that had made them famous. Lindsay obsessed over every detail, layering unconventional rhythms, distorted guitars, and intricate harmonies. He saw Tusk as a necessary evolution, a way to prove that they weren't just a band of radio-friendly hits, but true artists. The problem? No one else in the band shared his vision. Stevie and Christine preferred their classic songwriting styles, while the record label was furious that they weren't delivering another Rumours. When Tusk was finally released, it was met with confusion. The album performed well, selling millions of copies, but compared to the monstrous success of Rumours, it was seen as a disappointment. Critics were divided, and the label viewed it as a commercial misstep. The tension between Lindsay and the rest of the band deepened. His creative control had driven them in a new direction, but not everyone was willing to follow. At the heart of it all, Lindsay and Stevie's relationship continued to deteriorate. The wounds from their breakup had never truly healed, and years of working in close quarters only made things worse. Arguments became explosive. There were heated exchanges in the studio, and on stage, their performances were charged with barely contained animosity. Their love had once fueled their music, but now it was the source of endless conflict. The most infamous moment came during a band meeting, when tensions between them finally boiled over. The arguments turned physical, shoving, screaming, years of pent-up frustration erupting all at once. It was clear to everyone that the relationship between Stevie and Lindsay had gone from strained to toxic. Yet somehow, despite the chaos, the band continued. The music never stopped, but the fractures were becoming too deep to ignore. The dream they had built together was beginning to crack, and soon, something or someone would have to give. By the mid-1980s, Fleetwood Mac was a band running on fumes. The massive success of Rumours had catapulted them into superstardom, but years of personal drama, creative tensions, and relentless touring had left deep scars. Despite the struggles, their music continued to define a generation. But as the band prepared to record what would be their last major album with Lindsey Buckingham, the fractures that had been growing for years were about to split wide open. In 1985, Fleetwood Mac reunited to begin working on what would become Tango in the Night. The band had been on a break, with members pursuing solo projects, and there was uncertainty about whether they could capture their former magic. The answer came in the form of Tango in the Night, a lush, meticulously produced album that modernized their sound while retaining the signature elements that had made them famous. The record featured hits like Big Love, Little Lies, Seven Wonders, and Everywhere, songs that would go on to become some of their most enduring. But while the music was flawless, the band was anything but. Lindsey Buckingham, once again taking on the role of producer and creative director, poured himself into the album, obsessing over every detail. His perfectionism led to long, grueling studio sessions, and tensions between him and the rest of the band were at an all-time high. Stevie Nicks, fresh off a solo tour and struggling with addiction, was barely present for much of the recording process. Christine McVie, though contributing some of the album's biggest hits, was growing increasingly disillusioned with the constant conflicts. Lindsay's growing frustration was compounded by the label's pressure. Tango in the Night was shaping up to be another massive success, and the band was expected to follow it with a major world tour. But Lindsay was hesitant. He had grown tired of the cycle: record, tour, fight, repeat. He had sacrificed years of his life to Fleetwood Mac, constantly battling both personally and professionally to shape their sound. And now he wasn't sure if he could go through it all again. The final straw came in a heated band meeting in August 1987. With the Tango in the Night tour looming, Lindsay made his decision. He wasn't going. He couldn't do it anymore. The reaction from the band was explosive. Stevie, still holding on to years of resentment, reportedly lashed out, resulting in a physical confrontation between the two. Voices were raised, tempers flared, and just like that, Lindsey Buckingham was out of Fleetwood Mac. His departure stunned fans and sent the band into crisis mode. With only weeks before the tour was set to begin, they scrambled to find replacements, bringing in guitarists Billy Burnett and Rick Vito to fill the void. The tour went on as planned, but something was different. The energy wasn't the same. The chemistry that had defined Fleetwood Mac was missing. While they continued to be successful, it was clear that Buckingham's absence had changed the band forever. Lindsay, meanwhile, threw himself into his solo career. In 1992, he released Out of the Cradle, an album that showcased his distinctive guitar work and innovative production. Free from the constraints of Fleetwood Mac, he experimented with new sounds, proving that his genius extended far beyond the band. Though critically acclaimed, his solo work never reached the same commercial heights as Fleetwood Mac. Still, for Buckingham, it was a chance to create without compromise, without the baggage of the past weighing him down. As for Fleetwood Mac, they moved forward, releasing albums and continuing to tour. But without Buckingham's creative leadership, something was missing. The band had always thrived on tension, on the push and pull of its clashing personalities. With Lindsay gone, a vital piece of that dynamic was lost. For years, it seemed as though Buckingham's chapter with Fleetwood Mac had come to a close. But in the unpredictable world of rock and roll, nothing is ever truly over. The band's most iconic lineup had one more act left to play, and soon, fate would bring them back together. One last time. For over a decade, Fleetwood Mac carried on without Lindsey Buckingham. They toured, recorded new music, and tried to keep the band alive. But the absence of the man who had shaped so much of their sound was undeniable. By the mid-90s, the tensions of the past had started to fade, and the idea of a reunion, something that once seemed impossible, began to take shape. Then, in 1997, it happened. Fleetwood Mac's classic lineup, Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks, Christine McVie, John McVie, and Mick Fleetwood, came together once more for a special live performance. It was supposed to be a one-time event, a celebration of their legacy, but as soon as they stepped on stage, something clicked. The chemistry was still there, the energy still electric. And so, they did what no one expected. They reunited for a full-fledged tour. The result was The Dance, a live album and concert special that reignited the band's career. Songs like The Chain, Go Your Own Way, and Landslide once again captivated audiences, proving that despite everything, Fleetwood Mac still had magic left to give. The album shot to the top of the charts, the tour sold out arenas worldwide, and for a brief moment, it felt like the wounds of the past had finally healed. But beneath the surface, the same old tensions remained. Lindsay and Stevie still had unresolved issues, their history too complicated to ever truly be put to rest. While they managed to work together professionally, their interactions were strained. The band had come back together, but it was always fragile, held together more by nostalgia and business than by genuine reconciliation. For the next 2 decades, Fleetwood Mac continued to tour in different configurations, with Christine McVie stepping away for a time before returning. But despite the continued success, the tensions between Lindsay and Stevie never fully disappeared. It was only a matter of time before everything fell apart once again. The breaking point came in 2018. As the band prepared for another major tour, an explosive rift formed behind the scenes. According to reports, the conflict boiled down to one final ultimatum. Stevie Nicks allegedly told the band, "Lindsay goes, or I go." For Lindsay, it was a stunning betrayal. He had been with Fleetwood Mac for decades, shaping their biggest hits, carrying their sound, and fighting to keep the band creatively strong. And yet, in an instant, he was gone. He had been fired from the band he helped define. Mick Fleetwood later stated that the decision was made to maintain stability within the group, but for Lindsay, it was an emotional and unexpected exit. He later admitted that he never saw it coming, that after all they had been through, he had assumed they would always find a way to coexist. But this time, there would be no reconciliation, no dramatic reunion to bring them back together. This was the final break. Fleetwood Mac moved forward without him once again, but fans knew the truth. The band would never be the same without Lindsey Buckingham. And so, after decades of music, love, betrayal, and legendary performances, the story of Fleetwood Mac and Lindsey Buckingham had reached its final chapter. The legacy remained, the songs endured, but the band that had once defied the odds had finally run out of second chances. Looking back, Lindsey Buckingham's journey with Fleetwood Mac is one of brilliance and heartbreak, creativity and conflict. He helped shape one of the most influential bands in history, crafting timeless songs that continue to resonate decades later. But his time with the band was never easy. The personal and professional battles, the highs and the betrayals, it all left its mark. Now, after everything, the question remains, was it all worth it? For Lindsey, the answer is complicated. He has openly acknowledged the pain that came with Fleetwood Mac, the sacrifices he made, and the wounds that never fully healed. The breakups, the tensions, the fights. It wasn't just music, it was his life. And yet, despite the chaos, he never lost his passion for the art. Even after being pushed out of the band, he remains proud of what they accomplished together. The music, after all, is what lasts. While Fleetwood Mac may never reunite in its classic form again, their impact is undeniable. Their songs have become woven into the fabric of rock history, influencing generations of artists across genres. Rumours is still one of the best-selling albums of all time, and tracks like The Chain, Go Your Own Way, and Landslide continue to find new audiences with every passing year. And much of that legacy is tied to Lindsey himself. His distinctive guitar style, his intricate production techniques, his ability to blend rock with a sense of deep, personal storytelling, all of it defined Fleetwood Mac's most successful years. Even outside of the band, his solo work has pushed boundaries, showcasing his relentless creativity and refusal to conform. Now, as he moves forward in his career, Lindsey Buckingham continues to do what he has always done: write, perform, and innovate. His music remains his voice, a way to express the emotions that words alone never could. And though his time with Fleetwood Mac may be over, his influence within the band and on rock history itself will never fade. The story of Fleetwood Mac is one of love and loss, of artistic triumph and personal destruction. It is a reminder that behind every legendary band, there are human stories, messy, painful, and unforgettable. And at the heart of Fleetwood Mac's greatest era was Lindsey Buckingham, the perfectionist, the visionary, the man who helped turn chaos into music that will live forever.